Hi, I'm Brooke Gleichowski, and I'm so excited to welcome you to Beam Boldly. As an NCAA Division I gymnast, I know firsthand what it feels like to carry the weight of performance, expectations, and identity. Here, we're going to talk about all of it. We're going to talk about mental health, performance anxiety, NIL, resilience, and of course, how faith is our foundation that carries us through all of that. Whether it's stepping onto the beam in competition or just stepping out in everyday life, we are called to live boldly, and we're called to let our light shine. The name Beam Boldly was inspired by the verse Matthew 5:16, which says, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." To me, that's what this podcast is all about. So if you're ready to hear raw conversations, find strength in faith, and be reminded that you're never walking this journey by yourself, join me as we step boldly into everyday life.
What's up, Beam Boldly family? Welcome to today's episode. I am your host, Brooke Gleichowski, and today we have former NCAA head coach Nadalie Walsh. Welcome, Nadalie. How are you?
I am great. Hello, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, support you. You are doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited for this episode, you guys, because we have heard from a lot of different gymnasts and athletes, but we haven't had the chance to hear from a coach yet. So this is going to be a new perspective, but super interesting. And I think God is going to do a lot with the conversation that we have today. So to get us started, tell me a little bit about how you got into coaching and the type of coach that you were.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was always the kind of athlete that was coaching on the side when I could, working with the little kids, working with the older kids. It didn't matter. I just had it in me. I love helping people. And so I became a college athlete, had Achilles tear my junior year. My coach ended up leaving. And so I was at the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh, and he was always pulling me aside, like, "Hey, Natalie, let me teach you how to spot a Tkachev. I'm going to teach you how to spot a Shaposh and a Maloney and all of this." And so that's what he did with me while I was on the team. And I didn't realize that that was really significant, but he must have saw something maybe that he wanted to prepare me. And so ultimately, when he left, and then I became the assistant coach there right away, a couple years later, became the head coach, and just really brought my own energy, my own philosophy on walking with the light of Jesus, even though I couldn't really share Jesus verbally because you're at a university setting. But
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that everything I did was for the athletes first. And that's been my philosophy the whole time, caring about their physical, mental, emotional, and their spiritual well being. Even if spiritual stuff wasn't something they cared about, I could still try to represent well. And then, yeah, I just got into college coaching because I essentially became a head coach super young, couldn't even rent the vans to drive my team. And so I was like 23 years old, but it was
Wow.
wonderful. And that just grew. We won a national championship at Oshkosh, and that opened the door to go to Ball State. And that did really well there. And that opened the door to Utah State, which opened the door to University of Illinois. And I got such a young start. I have 2.5 decades in, and I'm just so excited to be doing more and different things now.
Yeah. Wow. That is so cool. I love how you were literally learning, like, as you were a gymnast, how to spot not just little skills like kips, but Takachevs. Like, that is so cool. So, you tore your Achilles your junior year. And was
Yeah.
that the end of your gymnastics career?
Well, I thought that it wouldn't be. I thought, "Oh, I'm
Mhm.
gonna make a comeback. I'll do my senior year." But when my coach decided to leave, he one day in the summer pulled me aside. I was maybe 5 months post-operation, and he said, "What's your plans next year?" And I was like, "Do you not want me?" Like, immediately, I was
Right.
like, "Okay, what do you mean?" And he basically said, "No, they hired a new coach, and I really wanna recommend you to be the assistant. Would you wanna do that? But if you wanna do your career, go for it." But I was always the athlete that I led conditioning, I was a captain, all of those things. But
Right.
when I had my injury, I remember sitting in the wheelchair because I hurt both legs at the same time. I remember sitting in the wheelchair and for about 5 minutes feeling sorry for myself at practice. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit was like, "What can you do to help your team?" And so I got out and started crawling around, fixing choreography, and it just kind of took off from there. So.
Wow. That is so cool. So then your senior year, did you take that coaching position while you were still in school?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, that is such a unique story.
Definitely. So took that position, was married, had a baby, went back into it, and then took over the program. And then everything else just became history.
Yeah, that is awesome. Okay, so you touched on this a little bit, but I wanna dive into it a little bit deeper. How did your faith drive the way that you coached?
Yeah, I think the way my faith drove the way I coach is that I always wanted to have his perspective on every single athlete. And there would be athletes that were, easy to work with, harder to work with, girls that believed in God, girls that didn't, and none of that ever mattered. I just felt like as a shepherd to this team, it was my responsibility to protect them, serve them, and to model that you can do really hard things, have hard conversations, and do it in love. And so the way that I would say I really tried to bring God into my coaching was to be consistent, try to be a light, be humble when I needed to, apologize if I should, and encourage them, and just really try to see deep into their hearts that not everything is what it appears to be. So if an
Right.
athlete had a bad attitude or they were being awful one day or mean to a teammate, I tried to not react to what was happening and really tried to get God's perspective on where does she need healing or where does she actually need some freedom, because I see her as an amazing person and I don't want her to get stuck in this kind of like yucky place. So
Right.
I think it was just a lot of trying to model it as best that I could.
That is really cool, and I feel like that's also a snippet into what we'll talk about later with what you get to do now, but having that perspective as a coach, 1, is hard because it is probably very frustrating when so and so is not being nice to their teammates, and especially in college, like, the team matters most, right?
Yeah.
So, like, those
Hmm.
situations are very difficult, and there's also a lot of hard conversations that happen in college gymnastics, whether it's about injuries or being cut or, like, unfortunate things like that, and being able to step into those conversations from a loving perspective is really, really cool, and I just think that's awesome.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you.
you. And you're right.
Yeah,
It is hard sometimes, and I'm sure not every athlete loves everything that happened in the programs like you bring up getting cut. But I just always tried to help athletes know like their worth and their value is not dependent on them being a gymnast. And if
right.
I could really help drive that message home to them, whether they were on the team or they were injured or they were the superstar. That had to be the message because you do better gymnastics when you're not trying to do it for all the wrong reasons.
So true. And I love what you just said about no matter where you are on the team, if you're on the sidelines, if you're getting a 10 every single time you go up, that's not the message. Like the message is still the same no matter what. I just think that is such a good line to keep in mind in whatever area of life you're going into.
Mm.
So I know we talked a little bit on the phone before this, and you were telling me how you did get to watch gymnasts and athletes' lives transform, and you got to experience with some of your athletes them finding Jesus and just their lives transforming. I would love for you to walk me through that. Tell me a little bit about that because that is really, really cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, these stories go like all the way back. And so being at four different schools, it's like, which stories can I pick? But ultimately, I mean, I can remember all the way back having an athlete be a biology major. And she was so smart and she had so many questions. She just couldn't fit together. Like, how can creation, evolution, and how does that all work out? And so
Right.
she had a lot of questions. And I just remember like it was actually my husband was there too, which was awesome. We in tandem were able to answer her questions that day. It's just like it got orchestrated for us, but we were able to just answer her questions through like the scripture and through what is truth and to lay to rest some of the things that were keeping her from God. And I think that that's what's really important when we're around people that don't know God, you don't want to shove it down their faces or make them feel uncomfortable. it's
Right.
it's about being a really good listener. It's about having good answers, and if you don't have answers, admitting it and going and finding it, having good follow through. And so that girl actually reached out later and she said, "Hey, hey, coach, I want you to know I'm raising my family with Jesus. And I remember the Jesus picture you had in your house. Where can I get that? And it was amazing. Her name
Wow.
was Amanda. And it was like she has now said that some of those conversations shaped the way that she raises her family now. And that just blesses my heart so much. And that's like a example where I got to actually talk about Jesus because that athlete was asking me. A lot of the other transformations I got to see, it was more about them learning to realize their worth. And that is beautiful because we're made in the likeness and image of God. And whether you believe in God or not, you are still made in his image. So I actually got to watch so many athletes transform right before my eyes where they became more confident, more comfortable. They could talk in a group, they could go out and compete and have joy. And all of those things, they're like fruit of the spirit. So I got to
Right.
watch that be developed in them, even if I never sat down and had a straightforward conversation with them. And that's the beauty of, I think, being able to bring God into your everyday life. It doesn't have to be what you say or what you teach. It can be how you lead and how you impact lives, and you get to watch it unfold. So, kind of a long answer, but hopefully that's a good
Yeah.
one.
No, I think that is so great, and it's so helpful to literally anyone listening. A lot of people think that, "Oh, to share Jesus, I have to have all this scripture memorized so that I can go tell all my friends," or I have to, say, "Oh, you need to come to church with me," or this or that. And there's so many ways that we can shine the light of Jesus and plant those seeds, those little God seeds in people's lives without it being super direct. And I think being in the coaching environment, you do have to be careful with that, especially now more than ever. That it's like university rules. So I think it's really cool that you didn't just shy away from trying to coach with your faith background and foundation. And instead, you just snuck it into each little conversation you had with the girl. Literally, just how you present corrections and feedback,
Hmm.
right? Like there's so many little ways that we can show kindness and patience and gentleness and self-control, which are all fruits of the spirit, just like you were saying, just in everyday life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like Jesus, Jesus all over the place. Of course, that's great too,
Yeah.
but but there's other ways we can do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that you can recognize that as well. Because what I did as a coach, everybody can do. I'm just a really big believer that a lot of people think if I want to get somebody to know Jesus, I need to tell them about, the gospel. He died for you. He went to hell for you. He went, he ascended in heaven. The actual gospel, which is so powerful, absolutely
Of
powerful.
course.
But what I think gets missed in the marketplace or out in the world where people aren't really church going people is he also died to get heaven inside us so that we can host his presence. We can host heaven and we can walk into rooms and shift atmospheres and we can have
Mhm.
godly perspectives and we can look at that cup as full instead of empty. And that is seed. And I
Right.
really believe that. I believe that that is sowing seed. And I think teammates can do that, coaches can do that, and you obviously are doing that a phenomenal way. And I'm
Thank
just so
you.
so proud of you and so excited for what you're doing.
Thank you so much. So now we have gotten to hear a little bit about your experience and your years as a coach, but now I'd love for you to share what you're doing now.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So, when you're coaching the NCAA, there's a lot of rules, restrictions, and you only get 20 athletes. And I had it for a while, like a burning desire just to reach more. And so I started with my summer camps like 5, 6 years ago. I started having mental training and confidence building in my camps. And it was everything stopped. We didn't do any gymnastics. We sat down. I had a workbook I wrote. I used the book that I published as well, but I had it set up so that it was time for me to teach and pour into them in ways that they might not get. when they're in training. And what I found in those camps, in those clinics, was it was radically changing these girls' gymnastics. We would get done with these sessions and they would be doing skills with confidence and they weren't scared anymore. And they were coming up to me and the other girls that, like, I would have my athletes helping in small group. And
Right.
they were this athletes, these camper athletes, they were just saying, "This is the best camp I ever went to. I've never had anybody do this. And this meant so much to me." And
That's
that became very
amazing.
life-giving. Like, I looked forwards to that. And so what I've done now is I started my own business. It's called the Be Ready Collective. Everything is about being ready. Be ready for college, be ready for competition, be ready to walk into an interview when you're done so that you can, carry yourself in a way that attracts people to you and you get those jobs in the future. But so ultimately, I do online mental training and coaching. I do group work. I go into gyms and I help. I do in person. The sky kind of is the limit of the access that I can now have to being able to bring tools and tips and healing and health and wholeness to so many athletes that are out there.
Wow, that is so cool. I don't know if there's anyone else that's really doing that, right? Like, there might be different companies or businesses that are doing little pieces of that, but it's really cool that Be Ready is a whole umbrella of things and opportunities, and there's so much that you can grasp from that. I also love that you have still been able to keep the connection of your love for coaching and with specific athletes. So, with that, what is the most common struggle that you kind of see working with athletes? I know there's probably a lot of gymnasts listening, and a lot of us gymnasts have a lot of the same struggles. So, what do you see a lot?
I think a lot of it typically stems around perfectionism, comparison, fear, and a lot of communication breakdown. Either they don't have the confidence to communicate and they think that they have to deal with the hand that's dealt to them. And what I've found is in helping these athletes in these individual calls learn their worth and learn to find their voice, it's definitely changing the way they go into practice. A little example, I had an athlete recently who she said, I'm injured and I needed to go tell my coach that I went back to the doctor and the doctor said that I can't do anything for, 4 more weeks. And she said, "And Natalie, I went in and I told her and I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her the
Mm,
truth. I said that I'm going to have to do everything I can that's not on my injury, whatever it was, foot or
mhm.
leg." And she said, and it felt really good to be able to tell the truth and not be scared and to water down and sugarcoat it because I was scared of authority. And I, like, literally wanted to cry because that's what's so important. We as people cannot have fear of authority because we can't have fear of man. And if we have
Right.
fear of man, then and we're fear of our, the fears of our coaches, we actually can learn how to have harder conversations. And it actually can reduce the lies that people believe about themselves and replace it with truth. And when you believe truth about yourself, you can walk into a room and you carry yourself so much differently. And so I think a lot of it is kind of all of that.
Mhm. I think that's so cool, and I'm thinking back and just reflecting on my own, like, club gymnastics upbringing, and while I had an amazing club coach and great relationship with her, I still had so many moments where I was like, "Oh, I have to go tell coach this." And I mean, I would probably talk with my parents about the conversation I was gonna have for 3 days to a week before even having the conversation, like, just to build up the guts to go talk about that. And it's one of those lessons that sports teaches you young is communication like that. Not only communication, between your teammates, but communication with authority. And that's really cool that through your company, you've been able to develop tools to teach younger athletes so that they can communicate better. Because not only is it benefiting their sport, right? It's not only benefiting, okay, now so and so is not going to get hurt because they were able to communicate that this thing has been bothering them,
Yeah.
but it also, just like you were saying, because they have the confidence in themselves, they're able to communicate better, and that confidence is only coming from God, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, the breakdown between the athlete and the coach, it is just miscommunication. And so, yes, I'm coaching athletes right now, but my also ultimate goal is to be able to help every coach out there. Because if athletes can come talk to coaches better, coaches can be less misunderstood. Because that's not fun
Right.
either on the other side of it. I know that receiving end. I know what it's like to have an athlete think that I meant something I didn't and be too scared to tell me so that we couldn't fix it, you know? So
Right.
I ultimately really want to help coaches with that as well. And then one other piece of my program, I also go in and help coaches. I help coaches understand how to teach in a way that helps athletes know that they're worthy and they're more than enough. And I published a book about that about 2, 3 years ago, just creating cultures that athletes thrive in. And that has
Wow.
just so much of my heart. And all of it is kingdom principles. But I'm not writing the book with a ton of scripture. I'm just taking the principles because the principles work. And when the seeds gets like watered and somebody else decides to explain to them what the gospel is because they can, it'll click. And then we're just helping God in every way possible.
So cool. Please dive into your book. I want to hear more about that.
Oh, yeah, it's just about creating culture that every athlete deserves, and it's really based on mindset can be like you need to have a tough mindset, right? Like it is
Mhm.
hard to do college gymnastics, but I believe firmly that toughness actually isn't the key to having the best performances. I think it's transparency. I think when you're transparent, you can self-reflect. When you can know what you're thinking, identify how you're feeling, communicate what's going on, you can actually utilize transparency to build confidence that's true, not just confidence that's trying to be tough and strong. Because you could be putting up a wall that's actually fear. Fear's
Right.
sneaky, man, that sneaks in and it tries to get you down. And so in my book, everything's written with analogies. I love using analogies because I think it's the same way Jesus taught. He taught in parables. He didn't
So
teach like
true.
directly. He taught in a story so that everybody can grasp the story and the parts that works for them. It's great. It's been a fun journey and I'm working on a workbook for athletes and excited to release that soon. But ultimately, I just want to be able to help as many as I can.
Yeah. No, that's great. I wanna go back for a second to when you're talking about transparency. I think what you're trying to say is there's 2 parts of transparency, right? There's the transparency with yourself of that reflection, and then transparency with your coaches. But would you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so great question. And in those two pieces of that, I would say if you are constantly shoving down your fear, your worries, your anxiety, your perception that somebody doesn't like you, or maybe they totally do, but you've decided in your mind that they don't, and you don't communicate it. What that does is that like shoves everything down and it creates a wall. And you try to be tough. You try to hold it all together. Ultimately, you're trying to pretend that everything's okay where you're not okay. And eventually that's going to spill out. That's going to come out whether you get frustrated at a practice or all of a sudden you have all these tears and you don't know where they're coming from,
I
or
hear you.
you're at a meet and it doesn't go well and you're angry and or you're frustrated and jealous that somebody else is doing better than you are. Like to me, all of that is stuffed emotions. And so when you can identify and be transparent with yourself, what's actually going on, you can go back to the root of where you learned to behave the way that you are, and you can replace that with truth. And once it's replaced with truth, you can ultimately do your gymnastics or do your sport with joy and love and excitement, and it doesn't hold you back.
Right.
And the second part of that is if you're struggling, if you are an athlete that feels like you have to pretend like you're fine or your body's not hurting, and you never tell anybody that you need help, then you're not being very transparent. And if you are not able to go out there in your best physical, mental, emotional, spiritual state, well, if you're not transparent about one of those parts, then you're going out there unwhole. And when you go out there whole, you compete so much better. And you're not doing it just to get the score or to run the race the fastest. You're actually doing it from a place of true identity, being healed and whole. And when you can do that, not only are you impacted, but everyone is. And then the journey's fun. Like it is not
Right.
fun to pretend. And like pride and humility have to find that balance so that you can be a confident athlete, but not false confidence.
Right. Wow, that's I'm, like, just taking all of that in right now as a as an athlete myself. I'm like, "I'm gonna listen to this back and take notes." I hope you guys are taking notes too because that was really good to hear, and I'm, like, reflecting on my own transparency and trying to figure out where I can be more transparent because I think that is so good, and that line between toughness and transparency is often overlooked, but I love that you brought that up and that that's a huge part of what you're doing now.
Thank you. Can I add one thing about the toughness piece?
Yes,
The
please do.
toughness of when I was saying that your words create your world, I really believe that you can be tough with yourself, but you're tough in a way, let's say, it's called beam boldly, right? Let's talk about beam.
Mhm.
You get on that beam and you make a pose and you say, I'm amazing, I am confident, I'm awesome. That is toughening up your mind. If you're thinking about the amazing things about who you are and what you're there to do, you are not entertaining all of these thoughts that you need to hold captive and throw down. So there's a way to be tough with yourself and have expectations, but not make it be about shutting down and trying to be tough on the outside when you're broken and hurting on the inside.
Right. That is so good. And it kind of reminds me of the word discipline too. We want to be disciplined with ourselves and our minds. In that discipline, we're taking our thoughts captive, right? That's the positive self-talk, right? We have
Yeah,
to be disciplined enough to literally commit to speaking to ourselves positively, right? Like that's what you were saying with the
absolutely.
as you hit a pose, you're saying, I'm amazing. I got this. That's being disciplined with yourself, which we are called to do. But there's that toughness and critical toughness that you're talking about where you're actually just shoving all those negative things down. And guess what? As more of them get shoved down, the pile just gets bigger and bigger. And then eventually they're gonna outbreak, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's, why I'm doing what I'm doing, just helping one athlete at a time when they need it.
Another thing that you and I kind of talked about was how you help a lot of athletes through the healing process. So I'd love to talk about that a little bit. I'd love to hear, your definition of trauma and kind of how you guide athletes through the healing from that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had a lot of training with like inner healing with many different churches and programs and things like that. And so my definition of trauma as with an athlete is like, let's take injury, for example. Let's say somebody does a Takachev, hits their heel on the bar, fractures their heel, and they get down off that bar. That is a impact to the body that is going to it's going to sit there for a while. But then there's also the emotional side of, the embarrassment, I fell, or I can't believe I did that. And then there's the, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to recover? I'm not competing. My teammates are. The guilt that they think, oh, I messed up and now my coach is going to be mad at me. Or you could just think of a million different things that would go through an athlete's mind when they have that acute injury that happens.
Yeah.
And so my definition of trauma in that is the enemy is sneaky and he wants to take anything that he can to hold you stuck. And so athletes will get an injury and then they will physically get better and maybe they learn how to do their gymnastics again or they know how to do their sport again. But they don't actually deal with the emotional side of what happened in the moment that they got hurt. They just kind of like brush it off and move on. And then there's fear to do that skill again. Or there's fear that the next time they get hurt, they want to like pretend they're not hurt because maybe a past coach got mad at them and didn't believe them that they were hurt. And so when they get hurt, they shove that down. Those are trauma responses. And so in those responding with trauma, it just basically means you're perceiving what's going on through the lens of what happened to you, but it doesn't mean that it has to be what continues to happen to you. And
Right.
so I walk athletes through trauma because I just help them go back to the place of when they got hurt. And honestly, so often trauma is tied to forgiveness. And sometimes it's forgiveness of self. Like I forgive
Wow.
myself for slipping on the beam and hurting myself. Like I forgive myself because gymnasts, particularly, are so hard on themselves that they'll carry that around for a long time. And in going backwards, we can pull out that dandelion root. We can plant
Right.
a flower instead where they get the truth because when they have that injury and when they immediately believe the lie that everyone's mad at me or I'm never going to be good again, that took root. You just got to replace it. Well, what is the truth? And sometimes the truth is so simple. It's just the exact opposite. Instead of everyone's gonna be mad at me, it's the truth they'll hear for themselves is I'm nobody's mad at me. And they just get free. It's not my job
Right.
to get them free. It's my I try to really facilitate for them to hear Jesus, even if they don't know who he is, because I know God loves them regardless.
Right. That is so cool. I'm reflecting on a major injury that I had in high school. I basically subluxed my ankle, like it
Wow.
dislocated and then it went back by itself. And since then, I remember coming back, I was like, I will never do Rudy again. Like, I'll learn any other pass. I'm never doing that again. Even though before that, keep in mind, like, I was a pretty good front twister. Like, I never had a problem with Rudy's, but this one experience happened and I was like, I'll never do it again. And eventually I started working back and I did it on the floor again and I immediately just panicked. It was like
Mm.
all the emotions that I felt from last time I did it just overwhelmed me so much. And I mean, I don't need to do a Rudy in my floor routine anymore. So I'm not really facing that. But I'm like genuinely so curious to know what it would have been like to have your coaching like by my side as I worked back from that because I mean, I was traumatized by that. Like I truly was. And then
Yeah.
and part of me didn't even realize that that was a little bit traumatizing until I overcame it and did it again, and every emotion I had just flooded back.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you went through that.
No, I mean, it's all good now. We are good, the ankle is strong, we're all good now, but I just am saying that for the athlete out there that's like, "Oh, yeah, wait, I'm going through this and that," or, "Ever since I did that on that one skill, I'm having a really hard time not being afraid of it," and I'm kind of just plugging your company because I know that it would have been so helpful for
Mm.
me, and I know that there's so many young gymnasts that could really benefit from that now.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And one other way that I see a lot, I'm kind of combining a past question of what am I working with? When I work with gymnasts, one thing I love is because I am a gymnastics coach, and when they get fear sometimes, like if they're afraid to do a series on beam or they're afraid to do a full in on floor, whatever it is, there's the trauma piece. But sometimes it's just that they weren't told mentally what to think, what to say, what to see. And so I'm able to actually come at them with every angle to help them.
Right,
And so I can also coach them to tell them mentally what should you see, what should you look at, because there's a lot of self shame when an athlete can do a skill and then loses a skill.
right.
That is such a cycle that causes so much devastation, where a lot of times I will try to help athletes understand if you became scared, it's not actually that there's something wrong with you. It's that you're really smart and you need to change the alignment of your head or the alignment of your shoulders,
Mm.
or you're throwing your head out into a skill too early. And so your body is stopping you because you're actually trying to go backwards into a double back or a back handspring, but your round off is under rotated, so it's going forwards. And that
Oh,
creates a stop. Well, what does an athlete do? They blame themselves. They self deprecate. They start to partner with the lies that it's their fault, they're bad, they can't do it, they're, all those shaming thoughts. And sometimes it's just giving them different coaching to help them understand that gymnastics is wildly difficult. And if part of your energy is going in the wrong direction, you could become afraid. That doesn't mean fear has to be your master. It means let's go back and figure out what are you seeing, how are you doing the skill, and let's make it a little bit more mechanical so they can ultimately relearn how to do it right over the screen. And I love that because then I'll get videos of athletes, whether they're college athletes or club athletes, sending me videos. I did it. I did the skill. And it's like, awesome. That's so good. It was always in you.
Right. That is so cool and such a unique perspective too. One, because it breaks down your gymnastics. So
Mhm.
I mean, one thing we say all the time on our team is like, keep it simple. Literally, keep your gymnastics simple, right? It's
Yeah.
not bigger than it is. But also, you're literally helping the gymnast learn the right technique, which is making their gymnastics better, anyways. So, not only is it helping their mindset and switching from that fear and frustration to, oh, I understand now. And wait, that makes a lot more sense. Now, when I do it this way with my head in or my shoulders this way, it feels a lot more comfortable. That is giving the athlete so much confidence on top of their skill actually being better.
Yeah. It's so beautiful to watch. It's exciting. Always makes me happy.
Yeah, that is so cool. Natalie, this has been so great. I've learned so much. I would love to hear what your final piece of advice is for a gymnast or an athlete who's trying to navigate their faith and sport.
Yeah, I think you have the most amazing title with the word boldly in your podcast. And I think you boldly go forth and you carry the light of God inside you and you be unashamed because he wasn't ashamed. I mean, he died for you. He paid a huge price for you and he did that so that you could live. And so I just my greatest last piece of advice would be you, serve him well, and know that you're loved because he wouldn't have went through what he went through if you weren't worth it. And what I tell people all the time who maybe don't know God and they're asking questions, it's you know what? Jesus would have went on the cross if it was just for you. And that blows my mind. And it's like he died
Wow.
for the whole world, but he'd have done it just for you. And so walk in the confidence that you have a God that you can serve and love that loves you more than you will ever understand.
Wow. That's amazing. I feel so inspired. Thank you so much, Natalie, for coming on today.
Thank you for having me and best of luck to you and the
Thank
Georgia
you.
Gym Dogs.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Being Boldly. Make sure that you subscribe, follow, and turn on those notifications so that you don't miss an episode. And yeah, we're so glad that you're here and that you got to listen with us. Bye, guys.